This week on HomeKit News, the Thinka Z-Wave Gateway for HomeKit. So this week we're looking at a new hub by a company called Thinka, and whilst this is just another hub in many ways, it is a bit different. It works with Apple HomeKit of course, but it's actually a Z-Wave hub that uses Z-Wave Plus, which includes S2 security, and also uses Smart Start, which we'll touch on later. It also works with Amazon and Google of course, but we'll just focus on the HomeKit side for now. So Connect Everything is a claim we'll hopefully put to the test in some fashion, but as you can see from the box, it's HomeKit compatible with the included QR code, so let's open up the box and see what we get. The hub is the first thing to greet you, and whilst I continue, here are some basic specs for the device in question, so feel free to pause the video at this point. Both the hub and the packaging do feel premium, I have to say, and the hub comes with a separate bracket that allows you to wall mount the hub if you so wish. Everything feels really well built and sturdy, including the wall mount, and there's not a hint of low quality constructional materials that I can detect, but let's see what else is included in the box first. There's a power supply along with a couple of regional adapters, and it's good to see they've decided to use USB-C for this hub. This device is only available in Europe at the moment, so we get an adapter for both Europe and the UK, but it all fits together nicely and once again feels really well built. Also included is an Ethernet cable of a decent length, as the hub is designed for a wired connection only, so like the HomeBridge you simply place the cable into the hub and your modem or router and you're pretty much good to go. All in all, first impressions are very good as I've already said. The box itself does have a really nice build quality with no loose joints or seams and looks very understated, even down to the barely noticeable Thinka logo. Let's have a closer look. Being that this is a hub, there's not a lot to see, but the rear section is where you get an Ethernet port to connect your router like we've already seen, a USB-C power port which I'm very happy about, and a USB-A port for internal diagnostic uses at present. The top of the hub features a very large button that can be used in a variety of ways, but most importantly to get the hub into pairing mode. There are 3 LEDs under the surface of the plastic, with only a green LED showing in normal operation. When in pairing mode, all 3 LEDs light up in blue. Various settings for the hub need to be accessed via the company's browser-based interface. Your hub comes with a 6-character code which you need to sign in with, along with a separate password. As you can see here, I've already added 4 devices to the hub, which are shown here, which can be viewed in list or grid mode. If I go into the settings for a device, you can see some basic details along with live notifications when something changes, but I can also go into the configuration section where, depending on the device, a variety of different parameters become available. If I go into the configuration settings for the Fibaro smart plug, for example, an enormous amount of parameters are revealed, which include things relating to power metering or the status of a device on the resumption of power. Some of these things are also honoured in HomeKit, even if they're not fully accessible via HomeKit. As the Fibaro plug has a colour LED ring, you can also access settings to control when and how this LED ring works. Here's a separate multi-sensor I added which shows all the data for each sensor along with battery life. Of course, there are also settings for the hub itself, for updates and resetting if needed, in addition to setting up the hub to work with other systems like Google for example. But you can also choose to add devices via this interface with a standard triple press on the button for a child device when the hub's in pairing mode. Big thanks to Mariella at Thinka for sending the hub, as well as the following 3 devices to test the hub with, which are a wall plug from Fibaro, which I should note is not this standard HomeKit version, the Smart Switch 7 from Aeotec, which is actually another smart plug, and the Tri-Sensor also from Aeotec. Starting off with the Tri-Sensor, and as the name suggests, this is a device with 3 sensors inside, which are a temperature sensor, a motion sensor, and an ambient light sensor. This device uses a CR123A battery, can be wall mounted or even recessed into a ceiling with a special bracket, and uses Z-Wave Plus. Next up is the European Fibaro plug that also includes a colour LED ring that I mentioned earlier, although you can't access the settings from HomeKit. It's possibly the smallest smart plug on the market right now though. Finally, the Smart Switch 7 from Aeotec, which is one of those devices that uses Smart Start, the latest system to add devices to your Z-Wave setup by simply scanning a QR code. Not too many devices use this at present, however. The power button also has a full colour LED that can be controlled within HomeKit as well. Unfortunately, the tri-sensor was faulty, so no demo on that, although I do have an alternative which I'll show you later. So here are the two smart plugs in action, and as you can see they're both in HomeKit and quite responsive. If I go into the settings for the Aeotec smart plug, you can see two separate services, one for power, which is just as responsive as you'd hope, as well as a slider and a colour picker for the LED light within the power button. I mentioned an alternative to the faulty tri-sensor, which is the MultiSensor 6, also by Aeotec and purchased myself. This device has the same three basic sensors from the tri-sensor, but also includes UV light, humidity and vibration sensors. It's a nice looking piece of kit with a clean minimal design, and like the tri-sensor, this uses CR1238 batteries. However, this device can also be permanently powered via the provided USB cable. Now as you can see, it uses micro USB, but that's okay, and it's great to have a permanently powered sensor, which isn't something you see very often. I'll next perform a quick test of the reaction time for this particular motion sensor. The speed seems okay, but not as fast as I would like, to be fair. I should point out, however, that this could be typical of Z-Wave sensors, but equally it could be typical of this particular brand and model. Here I'm comparing it to a Zigbee sensor, and you can see the Zigbee sensor is faster, and after performing this test a few times, the speed difference was always the same. I did purchase one other device just to see if this claim, connect everything, was in any way accurate, and this was the NanoMote Quad, a wireless smart button, once again by Aeotec, who seem to do a lot of Z-Wave products for both the US and Europe. The NanoMote is essentially a wireless smart switch with 4 buttons, each capable of single and long presses in HomeKit, with each button having raised bumps to help you press the relevant button in the dark, I guess. What is cool is that it comes with a ring to attach to your keys. Additionally, unlike most smart buttons, it contains a rechargeable battery, which I think is really handy. If you go to Thinka's website, they do list what device categories are exposed to HomeKit, either officially or in beta, but even though the list isn't fully comprehensive, you can definitely find some interesting devices like wireless smart switches that match the size and shape of your wired switches, for example. You can also find lots of sensors out there like recessed door sensors or water leak sensors. And when it comes to wired switches, there are some quite interesting devices like this standard switch with additional scene buttons all exposed to HomeKit. The sensors I showed you earlier can be recessed into ceilings as well, and if you want to go all in, you can even go with this water shutoff valve officially exposed to HomeKit. You should check out Eric's video on this device at Modern Day Tech via the link in the top corner. As the Thinka gateway is nothing but a gateway, you can only see its existence in HomeKit and the Home app if you go into the settings for your home, where it's listed within Home Hubs and Bridges. As with all of the gateways and bridges in HomeKit, any accessories connected to the bridge will also be listed in the settings for that bridge. As I demonstrated previously, the Aeotec Smart Plug has 2 separate services which are accessible via the settings, which mean you can actually have 2 separate tiles for these if you wish. If I next go into the settings for the NanoMote Quad, you can see it has all 4 buttons exposed, although they only allow for single or long press. Double press may be reserved for specific Z-Wave functions. By comparison to the Aeotec plug, the Fibaro is pretty basic in its regard, with only on or off exposed and no access to the LED light. And finally, if we look at the MultiSensor 6, we can see just 4 of the 6 sensors is exposed, with vibration and UV sensors missing. Thinka do have an app, but it's quite simple, only allowing basic information on the hub's connection status and basic details for child devices. However, it does allow you to add devices using Smart Start, where you're able to scan the code on such devices without needing to use the web interface. You can also allow remote access to Thinka if you need support. One thing that you might not be aware of if you're new to Z-Wave is that it uses different frequencies in different countries. This means that your Z-Wave hub has to be set to a specific range to abide by laws regarding radio frequencies. With that in mind, devices sold in one region won't work in another region and the hub due to this. So a sensor bought in Europe, for example, won't work with a hub set to the US frequencies. The hub frequency can be changed, but the child device frequency can't. On to our pros and cons, and starting with the pros, it's always nice to have a lot more choice of devices that'll work with HomeKit, of course, and in this case you have around 3,000 potential devices to choose from. As Z-Wave is on a different frequency to standard 2.4 GHz Wi-Fi, there are no issues with interference, which can sometimes be an issue with Zigbee, which also occupies the 2.4 GHz range. Now Z-Wave seems to take security of their protocol very seriously, and Apple seems to agree by allowing whole categories of devices to pass through the Thinka hub to HomeKit with no questions asked. Zigbee is pretty fast, and although Z-Wave doesn't seem quite as fast in our brief tests, it's still a lot faster than Bluetooth, what isn't really, whilst also generally offering even greater battery life. The first of the two downsides for me was that coming from HomeKit, I'm not a fan of the fractured methods in which devices can be added to the hub, with some being quite cumbersome or antiquated when compared to HomeKit. And finally onto the price point, which is a large initial cost and obviously not for everyone's wallet. So I would say that if you're just starting out with a reasonable budget and want a decent choice of items with reliable connectivity, then it could be a wise investment that'll pay for itself over time as you add more devices. If you're already deeply invested in other solutions with lots of devices, it may well be an unjustified expense, unless you want to start over, of course. Either way, it's a solid piece of equipment, and in the 2+ months I've been testing it, I've literally had zero issues with connectivity, with only the Z-Wave learning curve to initially contend with. So that's our overview done with, but you can read our in-depth review via the link, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. So until the next video, stay safe and smile at your neighbour.